Hello and welcome back. In this session we are going to show you how to download and install 3 of the applications that you'll need through the rest of the course to follow along with the examples and to use SQL Server yourself. Those three applications are going to be Microsoft SQL Server 2012. We're going to look at the Evaluation Edition, Books Online, which is the help files for Microsoft SQL Server, and the AdventureWorks database, which is a sample database that Microsoft's created that exhibits a lot of the features and programming constructs that are available in SQL Server. We're going to start today with Microsoft SQL Server 2012. Now, if you have the virtual machine for the class, you won't need to do the downloads and installs that we're going to talk about today. The virtual machine is already set up, it's got everything installed, and it's ready to go. And it'll take a lot of that work out for you. However, if you just want the experience or you don't want the overhead of running a virtual machine on your box, you can follow the steps that we have here today, and it will help you to get set up and running with the SQL Server install on your own box. Now, for these downloads and installs, I'm going to recommend that you use Internet Explorer, at least version 10. I'm going to be using version 10 today. The reason for that is that some of the previous versions of Internet Explorer and some of the other browsers like Chrome have had some issues with the download. Specifically, when we get to the point where we're actually downloading the ISO or the DVD image file, those other browsers and the earlier versions of Internet Explorer have had some problems where instead of getting the disk image, what we get is an ISO file that contains just the HTML page, your stuff is downloading page, which doesn't install very well. All right, the links and stuff will change, I'm sure, as we go through. One thing I've noticed throughout the years, though, is if I go to microsoft.com/sequel/sequel, I always end up at the main page for Microsoft SQL Server. Now we're going to download and install the Evaluation Edition of SQL Server. That will give us 90 days to work with SQL Server, which should be plenty of time for us to get through the course. If for some reason it takes you longer to get through the course than the 90 days, then you'll need to uninstall and reinstall SQL Server again. But you'll have the steps and have the experience then to go ahead and do that. Now, the SQL Server website, I'm sure, will change between now and when you come here to download. But usually somewhere across the top, in this case right here, there's a link called Get SQL Server. And if not, shortly down in one of the menu systems, you'll find a link that'll help you to get the Evaluation Edition. We're going to go ahead and click Get SQL Server, and then we have the Try It link here. That'll take us to the SQL Server download page. We've got one more click here, the little download button. And we're going to indicate that we're looking for SQL Server 2012. All right, now we're over at the Microsoft Beta Experience site. We're going to get the 64-bit version, and we're looking for US English, and that'll enable the download button. Now, clicking on the download button here will start Microsoft Download Manager, and it will begin to download the product. I've got a little security box here. Ask me where I want to put it. I'm going to put it in the Downloads folder, and now it'll start. Now, during this process, at some point, it may ask you to log in. And if it asks you to log in, it's looking for a Windows Live account. If you don't have one, there will be a link there to go ahead and create one, and there will be options to opt out of any emails that you want to get from Microsoft as well. So this download is going to be just over 3.5 gig. As you can see, it's going to take a minute here to download. What I've done is what you'll find a lot of the really good TV chefs have done, is I've pre-downloaded this. So although you can see here that this one's going to download, I've actually already got a copy on my hard drive so that we can proceed as if the download has just completed. So I'm going to step forward now, and we're going to go look at the file. Here's the file that we'll get after the download's complete. SQL Server 2012. In this case, I've downloaded the Service Pack 1. Now, this is a .iso file. There's several things that you can do with an ISO file. They're intended to be burned onto a disk, either a CD or a DVD. With the size of this file, in this case, it would be a DVD that we would want to target. And you can very easily do that by using either native Windows software or an application that you can download or purchase that will take a disk image or an ISO file and burn it to a DVD. In this case, I'm on Windows 8. What I'm going to do is actually just right-click on it and select the mount option. Windows will now mount this ISO file as if it was a disk that I just put into my drive. If you're not on Windows 8, there are other options that you have, software packages that will allow you to do something similar, to take an ISO file and present it to the operating system as if it was a DVD that was actually installed in a disk drive. Things like Magic Disk, for example, would allow you to do that in Windows 7 or earlier editions of Windows. Alright, I'm going to mount this up. You can see now it shows up as a DVD drive, in this case my G drive here. And it shows me the contents of the ISO file. I'm going to go ahead and stop this download since I don't need it. To complete. We'll close our download manager. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and run the setup here to start the install. Say yes to the user account control. Now, during this install, there will be a couple points where SQL Server is doing some work in the background and it takes a minute. When we get to those spots in the install, I'll go ahead and cut out and take you to the end of that task so that we can keep the video as short as possible. If you're following with the video while you're actually doing your own install, just go ahead and pause the video until that portion of the install completes, and then unpause to see the step that comes next. Now, there'll be a lot of options as we go through the install, different things you can select and different parameters that you can provide to the installation. If you want to have an install that follows along with what we're going to have in class, keep to pretty much the script that you'll see here in the video. You're welcome to deviate if you see a feature that you want to install along with SQL Server. Go ahead and do that. There's very little risk for the most part, but if it's something you don't understand, I recommend that you for your first install, that you keep through with the settings and the parameters that we show here. Alright, we have several options here on the left-hand side. Planning for our install, there's a system configuration checker, and upgrade advisor if we have a previous version that will allow us to kind of get an idea if we're ready to upgrade. There's an installation tab where we can install a new version of SQL Server, and this is where we're going to go today. If we were installing failover clustering, we could use some of these other options, or if we're going to upgrade. There are also tabs for maintenance, tools, some resources, documentation, and some more information here about clustering and image preparation. Today what we're going to do is we're going to install a new standalone installation of SQL Server. First thing that pops up is a rule check. All of our rules passed. If some of your rules don't pass, on that previous screen there's a little drop down there that you can open up to see which rules failed and what it is that you need to do to fix it so that the setup can install. Here I have a warning that I can't get to the Windows Update service. It will automatically look to see if it can get an update to the installer that you have. In this case, I'm not connected out to the internet, and so that check failed. That's not a problem. This will install Service Pack 1 for me, which is what I want. Okay, so now SQL Server is installing the setup files. This will take just a second as it goes through and sets up the system to prepare for the install. Alright, here SQL Server has told me that after I'm finished with my install, I'm going to need to do a restart. That's because some of the files that it's using for the install are in use, and it will need to finish the update after a reboot. Okay, the next screen that comes up is another rule check, and here you can see that all of my rules have passed except for a warning. here about my firewall. And here it's going to warn me. If I click on the warning, it'll provide more information. And what it's going to tell me here is that for the firewall, I need to make sure that the ports are open if I want my SQL Server to be accessible outside this service. I'm not concerned about other people connecting up to my SQL Server at this point, so I'm not going to be worried about the firewall, and it won't prevent me from connecting to my own local machine. If I had failed any of these other ones, I could click on the status here to get information about what I needed to do to fix those. In this case, a warning won't prevent me from installing SQL Server. So I'm going to go ahead and continue on to the next step. Okay, here I can either perform a new installation of SQL Server 2012, or I can add features to an existing instance of SQL Server 2012. Like we talked about in one of our previous sessions, you can install multiple copies of SQL Server on the same box. In this case, I have two that are already there. One that's our default instance of SQL Server, and one that's a named instance of website. You may say, well, these both look like they're named instances. Well, I happen to recognize this as the name of a default instance, an instance that doesn't have a name. If I wanted to add something to one of these other two instances, add a new feature to it, I could click here and select which one it is that I wanted to add to. In this case, I wanted to install a brand new instance, and this is what you will want to do when you are installing SQL Server the first time on your box. Here, if you have purchased SQL Server, you'll have a product key. You can actually enter the product key here to validate it and make it so that the install is actually not Evaluation Edition, it's actually a full-blown installation of SQL Server. In our case, we're going to use Evaluation Edition. That's what we're going to install. This gives us 180 days to use SQL Server. Okay, we're going to go ahead and accept the license terms for SQL Server. We won't be able to continue without that. And we're going to install features, the SQL Server feature. On this page, we select the features that we want to install with SQL Server. The one that's going to be most important, of course, is the Database Engine Services, because that's what we use to actually install SQL Server. There are other options here that you can optionally install along with SQL Server, such as replication, full text, data quality services, analysis reporting services, integration services, and these other tools as well. You can see that some of these shared features down here are grayed out on my install. That's because, as you saw in the previous slide, I've already installed a couple copies of SQL Server on this box. This will be the third one. And these were installed in one of the previous installations. Since we're doing an install, these are already there. They're checked to show that they're installed, but they're grayed out because I can't deselect those. They're already installed. The shared features that you're going to want to make sure that you install are the documentation components and the management tools, basic and complete. Most of the time, the defaults that come up are what you want to go ahead and keep. The rest of these you can install if you want, but they're not required. After this, we get another rule check. And again, if I wanted to see the details on the rules and whether or not they passed, I could get those here. And if I had a failure, I could look at the status, click on the note on the link here to get more information on what I needed to do to fix the failure. Okay, at this point, I can decide whether I want to install a default instance or a named instance. As you remember from our previous session, default instance is accessed using just the name of the server that you're running on. A named instance is accessed using the name of the server and then a slash and then the name that we provide here. I'm going to go ahead and create a named instance. I'm going to call it SQL 2012 eval so that I can tell that this is my Evaluation Edition version of SQL Server. You can see there as I clicked next that it updated the instance ID to be the name of the instance that I provided. While it's running here, I'll note down here at the bottom that it shows us the names of the instances that are installed, that are also installed in the box. So you can see the instances that are there. Okay, space requirements tells me that the amount of space that I need and how much are available. If I didn't have sufficient hard drive space to install SQL Server, then it would tell me at this point and wouldn't allow me to proceed. Okay, configuration allows me to set up the user accounts that SQL Server will run as. Here it gives me defaults, default accounts. I can change these to be domain accounts if I want, or other accounts if I want to let them have different rights. I can also change the collation settings. I'm going to leave these at their defaults. Here I can change the configuration for authentication to SQL Server. Windows authentication mode means that I'm going to be using my Windows login to connect to the server. Mixed mode means that I'll be able to use both Windows authentication and SQL Server authentication, which is your traditional username and password. In this case, I'm going to keep it just at Windows authentication mode, but I want to make sure that the person that I'm currently logged in as has rights to the new SQL Server, so I'm going to click Add Current User to put my username in here and allow myself to be an admin on the SQL Server after the install. Okay, here's a screen that allows me to send error reports to Microsoft. I'm going to go ahead and leave that unchecked. Final rule check, and a summary of the installation features and options that I have provided. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and click Install, and it's going to go ahead and run through the install. This takes just a few minutes, so I think at this point we'll break and we'll come back after the install is complete. Okay, we're back, and the SQL Server install has completed. It's told me that I need to do a restart, so I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then we'll come back and check to make sure that, that we're able to access the server. Okay, we're back after our reboot, so let's go ahead and check to make sure that our install completed successfully and we can connect to our new database. So I'm going to start at the Management Studio. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to browse here. If I click on the local servers here and expand the database engine, it'll show me the instances that I have installed. In this case, my default instance, the website instance, and our new SQL 2012 eval instance. So I'll go ahead and select that one. I'm going to use Windows Authentication. And there it is. So I was able to connect up successfully to my database. You can see there's no databases here. And that's what we're going to fix next. We're actually going to get the AdventureWorks database and install that. So let's go back to Internet Explorer again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go here to Internet Explorer, and I'm going to search for Codeplex and AdventureWorks. Codeplex is a Microsoft site that holds all of their sample databases and other code pieces as well. All right. If you're looking at the link here, this stands for Microsoft Database Product Samples at codeplex.com. Here at the top now here's the options that they can show me what I want to download, and we're looking for the SQL Server 2012 OLTP database. If you want to get their data warehouse database, you can get that as well. Clicking on either one of these links will actually take you to the same spot. It's just a list of all the databases that they have available. From here we get a list of the items that we have available to download, and I'm going to point out just a couple things here. First, here's the AdventureWorks 2012 data file. That's the one that we're going to get. They also have the data warehousing data file, and if you're looking to get some experience using analysis services, reporting services, integration services, you'll probably want a copy of this database as well. The install that we're going to use for the AdventureWorks will be the same for the data warehouse. It'll just be a different file. Also down here, we have the AdventureWorks 2012 CS data file. This is a case-sensitive copy of the AdventureWorks database. If you prefer to work with case-sensitive databases, meaning that a table name with a capital letter is different than a table name with a lowercase letter, and everything needs to be typed in proper case, you can get an AdventureWorks file that's case-sensitive here. I prefer not to, so I'm going to actually download the case-insensitive version. What you get when you download this file is you get the MDF file. The MDF is the main database file. And once that's been downloaded, you then attach it to the server. So I'm going to go ahead and save this file. It's a fairly quick download. we're going to go ahead and cut away so that you don't have to sit here for a minute and a half and watch the file download. Okay, our download's complete. So I'm going to go ahead and open the folder where my downloads are. I'm going to go ahead and grab this file. I'm going to move it to my database folder on my C drive. I'm going to take the 1 off. Apparently I had downloaded this previously, so it renamed it for me so there wouldn't be a data conflict or a file name conflict. Alright, now I'm going to go back to Management Studio where I have connected up to my database. I'm going to attach the database to this instance of SQL Server. The way I do that is by right-clicking on the database folder and selecting Attach. That'll pop up a window where I can add the file. Go out to the location where I had it, select the AdventureWorks data file. At this point, it'll pull in the file and it'll tell me what files it expects to find. It expects to find a data file and a log file. Well, all Microsoft has provided to us is the data file, and that one's found, but the log file doesn't exist. In this case, Microsoft shut the database down cleanly, so we don't need the log file. We're going to go ahead and remove this file, and SQL Server will recreate an empty log. So set up here, we'll go ahead and click OK. And now we have our AdventureWorks 2012 database. All the tables. We actually select one of the tables. Let's take the person table, select the top 1,000 rows, and here's the data out of the AdventureWorks database. Okay, so now we're set up with the AdventureWorks. And if you wanted to install the data warehouse version, you would follow these same steps, download the database, put it in the folder where you wanted the database to reside, and then go and attach it. If you have problems attaching the database and you get a permission denied error, it's possible that the service that you have SQL Server running as doesn't have rights to the folder where you've placed the data file. The easiest way to get around that is to put it in the data file that SQL Server created specifically for that instance. That resides under Program Files, Microsoft SQL Server, and you're going to have a folder based on the name of the instance. In this case, this is the folder for my default instance, and if you install the default instance, your folder will have the same name as this one. Or if it's a named instance, it's MSSQL11 dot and then the name of the instance. In this case, SQL Server 2012 eval, MSSQL, and then data. Now, my current user doesn't have access to this folder, but the SQL Server user that the SQL Server is running as does have access to this folder, and this is another good place to put the data file that you know SQL Server will have access to. Alright, our next step is to install the books online for SQL Server. If you go back to Management Studio, an easy way to take a look at your help information is to come here to the help file or the help drop down and then click Manage Help Settings. This will pop up a window that will allow you to choose whether you want to use local or online help. If you select online help, then whenever you highlight something and hit F1 or try to look at help information for SQL Server, it'll open up a browser window and take you to the MSDN website and bring you to the point in the help documentation for the item that you're looking for, but it'll do it online. This means that in order to use the help documentation, you need to have an internet connection, either wired or wireless, that allows you to go out and get the information online. The advantage is that that online information is kept up to date. As they find changes and things that they need to modify in the documentation, they go ahead and make the change, and you'll always have the most recent copy. However, if you sometimes work offline or have a slow internet connection, you may want to use local help. When you select local help, you have the option to download the help information, the help files, and then use them locally on your box. They're a little bit faster that way because it doesn't have to be pulled off the internet, but also you now have to manage those help files and keep them up to date when changes are made, or risk that some of the information you're looking at might be a little bit outdated. I'm going to show you how to install the local help if that's the route you want to go. If you want to use the online help, it's as simple as selecting this option and clicking OK. If you want to use local help, there's an extra step you need to do, and that is to install the content. You have two options here. Either download the help file and install that into the help directly from the disk, or install content by connecting online. We're going to look at installing from online. The first thing that will happen is the help will look for a list of content online that it can download and provide for you. A lot of this doesn't deal with SQL Server, but it is information that you can get if you want to install it and have it ready and local for you. So right now, what it's doing is it's fetching a list of help topics that it can install. Okay, it took a couple minutes, but it has retrieved all of the information that it can pull in for online. Top one here is, of course, .NET development. That's not something that we're interested in. We're looking for SQL Server 2012. And what we want to do is we're going to add the books online. When we select Update, it will go out and it'll begin downloading the books online information and incorporating it into our local library. This will take just a minute to download, so I'm probably going to step away here while it finishes, and we'll come back when it's completed the download for all of the help information. Okay, the library manager has finished downloading the help for SQL Server. We've already specified that we want to use local help. So now inside SQL Management Studio, we can highlight a word and press F1. And it will load up the help and take us to the information about that item that we've highlighted. Inside the books online, we also have our index, where we can search for something specific. And then pull up the help from our local box. All right, so this session we've talked about how to download and install SQL Server 2012 Evaluation Edition, the AdventureWorks and AdventureWorks Data Warehouse databases, and the books online. This should get you set up so that through the rest of the training series you have the tools and data that you need in order to follow along what you see in the presentations. Thank you, and we'll see you again soon.